So before I start, I wanted to say that I don't know how many Americans are in the room, but it feels a little vulnerable these days to be able to admit that, right? So I'm on your side. That's all I can say. Let's see, frontier technology. Why do we call it frontier technology? And what is it? So frontier technology, in short, is AI, IoT, big data, data in general, crypto, blockchain. Those things are well known to all of you. Some of my esteemed counterparts have already talked about it. But what I wanted to talk about was why indeed call it frontier technology when it's kind of like emerging technology, right? The idea behind emerging technology is it's nascent, it's coming, it's going to be a part of our daily lives. But with frontier technology, there's like a categorical difference, right? And what it really is the idea that governance and compliance, everything else, is not included, right? So the idea is we're going to throw this technology out there, and we're going to bring everything out to you, but we're not going to give you any ways to control this, right? And I think you've sort of heard this idea that, AI is great, but it's not under control, and all these things are going on, and everyone's kind of got an uncomfortable feeling in the pit of their stomach about the whole thing. And, part of the reason I wanted to come out here was, we're in the trenches at CoreIntel, which I founded, right? There was a reason for finding it. For founding a firm, right? I'm not a business guy in general. I'm not really an entrepreneur. But what I've seen in the industry has kind of forced us to do these things, right? And change how we look at things. There's a couple of studies that are out there. I think the first one is by MIT. And MIT last year said that 95% of Gen AI projects have little to no benefit, and 5% have some benefit. So it's a very interesting thing when everyone's using it, but it's not really having a lot of effect, right? The other thing to really talk about is what McKinsey says. McKinsey says there's about an 80% uptake with enterprise use of Gen AI in general. So what's going on, right? You're using everything you can, but you can't get any benefit out of it, right? So what is going on there, right? So as we're in the depth of it, right, most of my consulting is done on Gen AI, and making it useful and monetizing the whole thing. But what we saw was that it wasn't working, right? We saw this about 3 years ago. About 2 years ago, we came together with my team, and we talked about what the problems were. And what we came down to were a few key ideas, is that a lot of companies aren't set up to actually use it effectively, and that's a major problem, right? The idea that a company can reorganize itself around AI, why? Because it's a technology, right? The idea that you would change the way your organization looks to actually take advantage of AI is something that a lot of customers didn't want to do. And so what we realized was that the clients that we worked with that didn't want to take advantage of that, we categorically decided not to work with them anymore, because we actually would take their money, but we couldn't do anything for them, right? So the fundamental difference between them and the ones that did succeed, the 5% that we talked about, is that in that 5%, the difference is that they were not what we call data-driven. Right? So most companies use data for business intelligence. They use it for reporting, all kinds of different things, right? For decision-making, basic things. But they are not, in general, data-powered. Right? And the difference is that in data-powered companies, they couldn't exist 10 years ago. We didn't have that capability. Those data-powered companies, they couldn't exist because they rely on data as their fundamental DNA to actually make money with, right? So Uber, for instance, Airbnb, they needed a digital platform, but they also needed to have data to actually exist, right? So before that, before the cloud or anything else, those companies couldn't exist. Now they could, but those companies can take advantage of what Gen AI can bring. But the other companies that couldn't switch the way they do business actually cannot do those kind of things. So what we saw was there are companies that can work with this, and there's companies that are probably going to go out of business working with it. So the key thing that we've seen is data-powered companies succeed, and the data-driven companies generally, they're in trouble, right? And that's got me kicked out of a whole bunch of meetings for actually saying that, right? But you got to say it like it is sometimes. But as we look at some of the things that AI can do, right? It's great in a sense of all the things that it can do, but there's also the idea that who's leading AI, right? Who's running everything within the system? An example would be that we worked with a healthcare logistics company, and one of the things that we had was that they send cars or cabs or ambulances to take people to and from appointments in healthcare, and it kind of works differently in the U.S. to here, but the healthcare companies will give you a benefit to do those things. But as they did that, what we discovered was there's a lot of fraud in there. So we created a lot of agents to actually go figure out what was going on, and those agents worked great, right? So we figured out that there was fraud going on. Some people were saying that, hey, this ride cost $300 because we had to use a bariatric gurney, but in essence, they just had someone walk in and walk out, right? So they charged a lot more for the same ride that, than it would be. So as we saw that, AI started figuring all of this out for us, and we started seeing AI working brilliantly. It was great until someone asked the question, how's it working? How does it figure that out? Right? How does it know that there's fraud there? Well, I mean, clearly you can see there's fraud there, but how did the AI figure it out? No one knows, right? We had no idea what had happened. So when we realized that, when you're looking at prosecution for doing those kind of things, what do you do, right? Well, the AI told us, right? There's not a human being in that decision loop. The scale of it is huge, right? So we have probably millions of rides that go on in the U.S. where we can handle that. But the reality is, without a human being in the loop somewhere, right, we can scale that level of judgment. But the problem with that is we're not quite sure if it's right or not, right? And that's problematic. And as we ask questions of the AI that we created, of all the LLMs that we create in healthcare elsewhere, the answers look right. But we can't be sure or verify that it is right. Because unlike regular data, there's no way to trace that lineage back anywhere to actually see if anything is correct. So it's a very uncomfortable feeling that we're having in a data-driven system or a data-powered system of exactly what is right and what is not right. And this is the crux of the situation that we're dealing with now. It's a trust factor with AI. And as one of my counterparts said on this, data is the driver for all of this, right? And if your data is not good underneath and behind the systems that you have, you're going to struggle because you're not going to know whether the system's got the right answer or not. And that's currently where we stand. And when we have systems like that, the question isn't really, how do you use AI? It's really about how do we understand it faster before someone else does? And how do we get ahead of that? And how do we actually figure out, like when we ask for permission, right? When is that going to be needed? Because clearly in the systems that we've been creating, the AI is not asking for permission, and we don't have an answer behind it. So, I'm going to stop there because I know you have a time crunch and we've got more to talk about, but we can take this up tomorrow.
Thank you very much indeed.
You.
Thank you very much indeed.